According to the Economic Development in Africa Report 2020 by the UN Conference on Trade and Development, Africa loses about $88.6 billion, that is 3.7% of its gross domestic product annually, to illicit financial flows. The High-Level Panel on International Financial Accountability, Transparency and Integrity for Achieving the 2030 Agenda report, released in February 2021, cautions that illicit financial flows, which include trade misinvoicing, tax abuse, cross-border corruption, and transnational financial crime, drain resources from sustainable development, as well as worsen inequalities, undermine governance, and damages public trust. Speaking at the opening ceremony of the 57th annual meeting of the African Development Bank Group, President Akufo-Addo charged African governments to put in place stringent measures to end foreign illicit financial transactions by multinational companies.
Time has come to move towards an economic model which serves our interests, not others. Profits from our resources have benefited foreign creditors for far too long, while we suffer abusive borrowing costs on the international capital markets. There is no basis for our economies being saddled with the so-called African risk premium, which translates into higher spreads than for our European and American counterparts, particularly when our resources were the catalyst for the economic advancement of Western nations. It is time we work to address and remove the structural barriers to our development. And we must also deal with tax dodging and illegitimate commercial transactions by multinationals, which account for 60% of the $88 billion United States dollars of illicit financial outflows from the continent annually, and other relationships which inhibit our development.
Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta urged the bank to leverage the African Development Fund's balance sheet to raise additional capital for Africa's development. According to him, the bank must put in place measures to ensure that no financial institution has a deeper foothold on the continent other than the African Development Bank.
In designing our continent's response strategy, we must build from our innate resilience and strengthen partnership. Africa Development Bank's focus here must therefore be guided by advancing progress across a number of pillars, digitalize our society, realize the potential of raising innovative climate financing, explore possibilities to scale up social protection programs, bring greater transparency to the methodologies of rating agencies, make progress on SDR rechanneling, and use the AFDB as a conduit for deploying SPRIAs on the continent, and leverage the ADF's balance sheet to raise additional capital for the continent. We must remedy a situation where any financial institution, including the Bretton Woods, has a deeper foothold on our continent than our own Africa Development Bank.
President of the African Development Bank Group, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, assured that the bank under his leadership will continue with many of its investments aimed at ending hunger on the continent. He bemoaned the negative effects of climate change on the continent and its impact on food production, which has been a challenge for many.
Climate change is simply short-changing African economies. Africa suffers $7 to $15 billion per year in losses to climate change, which are projected to rise to $40 billion per year by 2030. Africa has no choice but to adapt to climate change that it did not cause. To support the continent in doing so, the African Development Bank has doubled its financing for climate to $25 billion by 2025. Without any doubt, the African Development Bank is the leader on climate adaptation in Africa and globally. The share of our climate finance dedicated to adaptation is 67%, the highest of all multilateral development banks, and I was particularly excited when UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon singled out the bank in the UN General Assembly last year that the bank is leading and others should follow.
The 57th African Development Bank annual general meetings, which have begun at the Accra International Conference Center, will set the agenda for Africa's transformation and recovery from the current economic challenges facing the continent amid the ongoing pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine war. The annual meetings are the most important events on the governance calendar of the bank group, attracting around 3,000 delegates and attendees annually. Under the theme of achieving climate resilience and a just energy transition for Africa, the annual meetings will act as a forerunner to the UN Climate Change Conference, which will take place in Egypt in November.